I promised an update to the theft from Paris, from the Louvre. This is from Bloomberg Pursuits. It's called The Art of the Steal, and it goes into the sad, likely fate of the Louvre treasures. So I'll give a quick reminder. I had this prepared using Copilot AI, just a summary of the events that led up to where we are now, and then I'll go into the news that happened today that is related to this. So a quick summary. Thieves stole 8 royal jewels worth 88 million euros or $102 million from the Louvre in a daring daytime heist on October 19th, so a little earlier this month, 2025. 7 suspects have been arrested. Now, the update today is that 5 of those 7 arrests were made today. But wait for this, the jewels remain missing. So these were jewels that were on display in the Louvre. These are very old, I believe, here it is. These are from the 16th century. These are the French crown jewels. They are used for a variety of special events that they're pulled out and worn. These are crown jewels of France. Apparently, these are some of the few that are left. There's been many more, but as you can imagine, over 400 years, there's been various sales and possibly other thefts, but various sales that have reduced the amount of jewels that are still available. Some have resurfaced in private collections, but so obviously this is a very big deal in France. And it speaks to a little bit about what may be going on in the world now. And just if we go back to the first article, how there's often rhetoric about taxing the rich and whatnot, who's to say that while these thieves, they have personal agency, they have to be responsible for their own actions. But I can see how if the temperature's turned up in some anti-rich, anti-elite rhetoric, how people wouldn't be inspired. And perhaps that is what happened. I'm speculating, but perhaps that is what happened. Again, the thieves still have to be in control of their own destiny. Just because someone says something doesn't mean that you go and act rashly and commit crimes like this. If we go back to the Bloomberg Pursuits article, the author says it would have been bad enough. Here we go. It would have been bad enough had the jewels simply been removed from French patrimony to the lair of some mustache-twirling evil billionaire. So the author of this article is discussing about how there's a sad fate, which we haven't gotten to yet, but how there's going to be a sad fate to these treasures. And yet they're still finding an opportunity, in my opinion, to stoke the anti-rich sentiment. Right? I find that a bit ironic because they're saying it would have been bad enough had it ended up in the hands of some mustache-twirling evil billionaire. And maybe they're just being provocative. They want people to read the story. They want them to comment about it on their podcast. So I guess they got me there. But in my opinion, that's kind of playing into stoking the flames. They go on, but it's vastly more likely that their ultimate fate will be much worse. They'll end up ripped apart, the stones recut, the metal melted down, their value literally decimated. And so I always wondered what happened in these cases. When something of incredibly high value is taken, how the heck is that sold? How is that fenced? How is that, how does that just disappear? Because obviously the thieves took significant risk breaking the law to do this. And so they must have thought there was a way to get paid at the end of the day. Now, I would think if it was a painting, this would be much harder, right? How do you sell a stolen painting? If a painting was stolen, that would be news around the world. And how do you then go sell that? It would be very difficult because even if you were an unscrupulous billionaire buyer, you would know that you're buying some hot painting, some stolen painting. And would you be willing to pay full price? Probably not. You would probably be looking for a discount because now you're also taking risk to receive stolen goods. And you know that the thieves are in a bind and that they may not have many buyers. And so you may have some bargaining power there if you were to participate, if you were extremely rich and were to participate in something like that. But when it comes to these jewels, I think the author does have a good point. They'll end up ripped apart. The stones recut, the metal melted down, and their value literally decimated. And so they're saying, if we go back, it was $102 million was the value of these. Once you break them apart, the pieces wouldn't be sold for $102 million, right? It's losing its part of the value, part of what goes into that $102 million. You have the raw value of the gold that was used, the raw value of the diamonds that was used, and then you have the fact that it was put together and it has this 400-year history and it's tied to French royalty and that sort of thing. And that's where a lot of the value comes from. I'm sure there's significant value in the raw parts, but a lot of the value will also come from the history and legacy and the combination of these. So it's saying that the thieves will not likely be able to realize that full value because, again, you run into the painting problem, right? If you want to then sell these jewels that have been in the news, how the heck do you do that? How do you find, again, an unscrupulous billionaire buyer that's willing to take the risk with you, essentially, and participate in this and buy those for a price that the thieves would think is worth it? So I think, obviously more arrests made today. We'll see what happens. I hope they find them, right? I think it's easy to say theft is bad. And so I hope they're able to, the authorities are able to find them and return them so that museum goers and tourists from around the world can look at them. I'd sure like to take a look if I was there. Not something I'd probably put at the top of my list and say, if I ever go to Paris, I have to go look at these. But if I found myself at the Louvre, sure, yeah, let's look at these. Let's look at these $100 million jewels. That'd be something cool to see. I'd be fine with that. But I get the sense that the story's already fading a little bit. It started to move down in the various business media. It's not, and maybe that's a result of not having many updates, but it's already kind of fading. And I can tell if you've seen the Thomas Crown Affair, there's two. There's the original, which unfortunately I haven't seen yet, and then there's the remake in 1999 with Pierce Brosnan. But there's a quote I found relevant here, and I'm sure this is where many people in the world might be finding themselves, even if they disagree with theft, and that's bad, and they'd like to see them return. Denis Leary's character, he plays an investigator. Rene Russo's character represents an insurance company. So the detective, Denis Leary's character in this case, he says to her, but the week before I met you, I nailed 2 crooked real estate agents and a guy that was beating his kids to death. And he goes on to then talk about how the swirls of paint that are really only, that this is involving swirls of paint that are really only important to some very silly rich people. I don't give a darn. Right. And that's probably what many people may end up thinking. I think that's why the news stories on this are starting to sink, in addition to not having many updates, except for today when we found out that 5 more suspects were arrested. So we'll see what happens. And, thefts like this, it says the last theft at the Louvre, this theft marks the first major art robbery at the Louvre since 1998. So that's been a good 25-year run since there's been a major theft like that. But thefts of very high value items still happen. I wouldn't necessarily say they're so prevalent, but there have been some high profile ones. If you remember, Kim Kardashian, oddly enough, also in France, was held up at gunpoint in a hotel, and many pieces of jewelry and watches and I believe handbags were stolen. And if you look at the example of Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, you might know him from the Shark Tank. He's also a frequent contributor to the business media. He's very well known for his extensive watch collections. And he's amassed a watch collection on 2 different occasions, and it's been completely stolen from him. So he's spent time and found all these unique pieces that he likes, whether they're super expensive or if he just thinks they're unique, and it was stolen. And then he went back and started rebuying pieces that he wanted, and then they were stolen again. And so this is a problem. Things like this can happen. And so from our perspective, right, if you have a high income, if you decide to buy many luxury items, which we talked before, it could be an issue. It comes with insurance costs. They could be difficult to clean. We talked about the climbing housekeeper salaries the other day. But if you decide to buy nice things, then obviously I think the basic recommendation is to just not show them off to a bunch of people. Don't make it glaringly obvious that you have a bunch of nice things. Otherwise, you run the risk of almost having to create your own wealthy prison, right? With all of your spoils that you don't let anyone in to see because you'd be so afraid that they'd be taken. It's tough because you want people to be able to live their lives, and if they want to spend their money on a bunch of fancy things, sure, go for it. But it also comes with a risk. And so what you can do is try and only, if we're talking about jewelry, since that's what was stolen, wear it only in the presence of people that you trust and friends. Don't necessarily just wear it to a grocery store every day or something like that, if you understand what I'm saying. So try and maybe keep it more protected, and then also or keep your usage of it more quiet, and then also protect it as much as you can. Insurance, strong and sturdy safes, right? Managed properly. I think that's the best way to go about it. So that's the news for today. Have a good night.